Good evening. My name is Volk. I'm a worker robot from the planet Calidor, and when I'm not working or secretly murdering people,
Oh no!
I enjoy viewing things from the planet the men I work for once lived on. A place called Earth, and I find a lot of what they refer to as films have either been ignored by the people of their planet, or severely panned by the fellows they call critics. So I've decided to pop on here and tell you about some films that I think you Earthmen have ignored for too long.
Shut up!
Alright, I'll get on with it. Today's film stars one of my favorite Earth actors, Boris Karloff.
Well, I'll say no more, but I promise you one thing. This is a thriller.
Karloff was one of the great horror movie actors of the 1930s and 40s, starring in dozens of films and with his hypnotizing eyes and amazing voice.
Is she not beautiful?
He was always an absolute delight. Many years later, in the 1960s, when the horror genre started to change with films like Night of the Living Dead and many others that I couldn't be fucked to find footage for, Karloff was thankfully still making many appearances, in both film
Starring the incomparable Boris Karloff.
and television.
Tell me, was that your last picture?
I hope not. The two of us.
Even if it was occasionally in films like Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. Yes, that is a very real title. I sometimes wonder about the intelligence of my employers. Around this time, Karloff also did some work for producer/director Roger Corman, a man who's produced hundreds of movies and is responsible for beginning the careers of a fuckload of soon-to-be famous people. One of these was a young man named Peter Bogdanovich. Now, at the time, Bogdanovich had recently been an uncredited second assistant director on Corman's biker flick, The Wild Angels.
They're wild and no angels, law-defying, getting their kicks from violence and torture.
So one day, Corman went to Bogdanovich, and presumably the meeting went something like this.
Bogdanovich. Yes, famed movie actor Boris Karloff owes me 2 days worth of filming. I need you to make a movie for no money that uses those 2 days he owes me. Do this or I'll force you to direct shark movies for the rest of your life. Okay. Good.
And that film ended up being both a perfect swan song for Karloff and one of the few horror films of the 1960s that I believe can still frighten today. Karloff stars as Byron Orlock, an aging horror movie star who's fed up with being in the spotlight and wishes to retire.
All right, what are you going to do? Plant roses? Actors don't retire. About 6 months and you'll blow your brains out, Byron.
I'm an anachronism.
What does that mean?
Sammy, look around you. The world belongs to the young. Make way for them. Let them have it.
Despite this, many of the people he works with are trying to get him to do a promotional appearance at a local drive-in theater.
Marshal? He wants to talk to you. He just went to the John.
So the director of his previous film, played by Bogdanovich,
How did you like it?
I liked it.
You did? Oh, I didn't.
attempts to convince him to attend the drive-in event. What follows is a series of honestly very funny, charming, and somewhat touching sequences that serve as a great capper to Karloff's career.
Ah! Have you gone mad?
The film celebrates him, even including footage from one of his early roles in Howard Hawks'
The criminal code.
In fact, the criminal code scene is one of my favorites in the whole film. It's both funny, with Bogdanovich doing his best drunk acting,
I think I'd better go home now.
I think you better stay here.
I think I'd better stay here.
and quite important as it very clearly states the film's
You
thesis.
know what they call my films today? Camp. High camp. Wait a minute, I want to show you something. My kind of horror isn't horror anymore. There we are. Look at that.
Karloff's performance in this film is a great one to go out on and feels just as effortless as ever, as he weaves his way through some lovely dramatic scenes, humorous scenes, and even gets a chance to tell a nice spooky tale.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'd like to leave you with a little story to think about as you drive home.
How lovely. It's just wonderful to see Karloff, even in his 80s, still in top acting form.
You blew my mind.
Obviously.
Byron Orlock considers himself an anachronism, starring in films that he thinks are no longer relevant. Again, that bit with the newspaper.
The only thing you've said that's right is about this.
No one is scared of movie monsters anymore, when there's real-world horrors out there.
Hey! What are you doing? You know better than that!
But if that is the case, within the context, if Karloff embodies the old monsters, who embodies the real-world monsters?
I'll take it.
Well, meet Bobby.
Aren't you going to go to work?
Bobby proceeds to commit more horrific acts of violence. And an absolute doozy of a finale ends up with the same drive and Orlock is making his appearance at. Quite a sharp contrast to Karloff's scenes.
Just got it.
Before the massacre happens, the scenes with Bobby are almost sitcom-like. And Tim O'Kelly plays Bobby before and after the massacre with such normality, which serves to make the shock of the murders more effective, and all the sequences following it more disturbing. Just look at him in this sequence, where he casually eats a sandwich while shooting at innocent people driving by on a freeway. It's such a horrifying performance because there's nothing theatrical or phony about it. He feels like a real person, and a real killer. The sound designs in these sequences also deserves mention, as it puts the audience in the place of the killer. We hear all the movement he makes. We hear his breathing right before he fires his gun. And the entire film plays without a musical score, just the sound of either the performers,
Going out with your dad again?
Yeah.
or in the case of the murder sequences, Bobby firing the gun. And speaking of the film's atmosphere, I should probably mention Bogdanovich's direction, which is quite simply a fantastic debut for him. It's got a great blend of artificiality with the earlier sitcom-like sequences and realism with the later murder sequences, and all the framing and camera work is excellent. In fact, the whole ending is a masterwork in building tension. Now, a lot of the content I've described at this point is quite upsetting, so it's not a surprise that, upon its original release, it was not a very big hit. Today, it's mostly remembered for being Bogdanovich's first and one of Boris Karloff's last films, and the only DVD release available is currently out of print. Although next year, the Brits will be getting a Blu-ray release of it. To myself, this film embodies the change in horror cinema. The character Orlock is on his way to becoming a relic, not quite there yet, but close. Meanwhile, Bobby is the new and very real horror. And despite Bobby being physically beaten at the end, in the only sequence that might accidentally make a modern audience member crack up, he does leave the old horror star frightened and baffled. One thing I thought of while watching this is that humans often like to consider things dated, but I don't think they would have the same reaction to this. Because while films like Night of the Living Dead, from a similar time period, may feature scenes that could come off to modernize as semi-comic, there's not much here that could incite the same reaction. There's nothing funny about someone committing mass murder, especially when it's as realistically presented as this is, because the real-life monster in this film wasn't just real when it came out in the 60s. It's still real today. He hasn't gone away since this film was produced. He's still around. And that's what's truly horrifying with this film. And now, one of Boris Karloff's finest lines of dialogue.
Yes, please. Is that what I was afraid of?